Optimal Brian. I'm kicking out Optimal Brian. I'm better than I've ever been. I'm kicking out Optimal Brian. I'm better than I've ever been. Shout out a famous birthday and find some online games to play. Have some fun, reflect and pray. Optimal Brian, Optimal Brian, Optimal Brian. Good morning to you, whoever you are, wherever you are. This is Optimal Brian. It is February 13th. You want me to prove it to you? Hey, listen, if that's what you want, I'll prove it to you. 9 a.m. on February 13th, located outside of Philadelphia, PA. We're going to try and optimize my day and optimize your day with a little bit of Optimal Brian here. My sales pitches, everything is available at briandemarco.com. I have music playing underneath this, which can be listened to, one of my 7 albums, at briandemarco.bandcamp.com. So what do we got? We got February 13th. Let's lay out some of the birthdays that come up on today. And let's see, Peter Gabriel turning 73. One of what I believe we listed out here, 3 Peters in the music world who take today as being their birthday. One being Peter Tork, who is of the Monkees, and then Peter Hook, the bassist for New Order. So it's a big day for musical Peters. Robbie Williams, continuing the trend, is 49 today. Some in the sports world, Coach K, Sal Bando from the A's teams in the early 70s. He just recently passed away earlier this year. I also saw a name that came up was a guy named Greg Fulginitti in North Wildwood. He was born in 1951 and was a record engineer in the 80s and 90s primarily. Lots of Grammy Awards and worked in movies. And for somebody from North Wildwood, I had never heard of him. And I had spent a lot of time there. Now, guy's a bunch of years older than I am, and it seems like he left town right after graduating high school in the late 60s. Also had on here Kevin Stocker, who was born in 1970 and was a Phillies shortstop. Now, kind of lead me into something here, and I'm going to start up with our wordles. You know how this is played, so I'm not going to spend as much time explaining that, maybe just talking to you guys today. Kevin Stocker had been on the Phillies team. He was called up as a rookie in 1993 to be part of a team that would go on to win the National League pennant. But they lost that. That was the year Joe Carter hit a home run and they lost the World Series. So Kevin Stocker's remembered, but probably not immortalized because they came up short. And when you come up short, well, you're remembered by some, but not by everybody. So, there we go. Got the first word down. And we look at last night, the Eagles lost the Super Bowl, and I'm in the Philadelphia area, so ask ourselves, what's the impact on that? What does that mean to us here? And it got me thinking back to the Super Bowl of 1981. After the 80 season, the Eagles played the Raiders in the Super Bowl. I was in 9th grade at the time, and probably the only, Raiders fan in my school, and it was a big week leading up to that. The Eagles had never been in a Super Bowl before. This was a big deal. Raiders, I had been a fan from their teams in the 70s with John Madden when I was a real little kid, but now I'm 9th grader, and I got to play the role of like the pro wrestling villain. All right, I'm the foil because the whole school, green and white banners, teachers are teaching classes that are football related. Phillies just won a World Series, but this was looking to be even bigger. Everything was just, we had won, everybody was on fire for this, and in a great mood. And I was the kid in silver and black. And again, Cowboys, you had some alternate teams that were fans of. Dolphins were big back then, but I was the only Raider fan. And I watched the game, and maybe not, the Eagles got blown out, basically. Started bad, I think a pick in the first period, and just went downhill from there, 27-10. They lost. I remember walking out after the game that they played, that went to, I'm going to assume Super Bowls ended earlier back then, maybe were played a little earlier, because I remember walking outside Sunday evening after the game in suburban Philadelphia, and you know what the day was? It was a cold winter, might not have been, it wasn't like -5, but it was just cold, wintry, no leaves on the trees. It was a winter day, very quiet. And I go to school the next day, and it's the same thing. Nobody wanted to hear me brag. There was no rubbing it in. It was just a bunch of people taking down all the green and white banners, teachers going back to regular assignments. Everybody was kind of a little, There wasn't going to be any days off. There wasn't going to be any parade. There wasn't going to be any day of, let's bring in cupcakes and have a party kind of thing. And I learned something then, and it stuck with me ever since. Where you're living, it's not a bad idea to root for the home team. I didn't have to, right? There's free country, but you know that it would have been a happier day, right? If the local team had won, we'd have had another fun week. And in the middle of winter, that's saying something. There's some value in that. It wasn't easy to be pulling on the wrong side of the rope when everybody else was going in one certain direction. So thought about this, thought about these choices that we make. What are we called to? To be at least engaged members of society, right? A rooter. And I was rooting for the opposite team. I wasn't rooting it for because they were my team from a town I had come from. I was just rooting for them because, you like the helmets, I guess, those kind of things. How am I different rooting for the opponent versus maybe a large percentage of people who are apathetic to it at all? No, I don't follow that. I'm not really into that. I'm a couple generations removed from the immigrant experience. Italian immigrants. They brought their culture to the U.S., but in a larger sense, they shared the new country's culture, right? They defended it in battle and with their votes and with their civic duty and responsibility, but they maintained their cultural identity. So I like to think that loyalty works this way in all walks of life, whether it's your friends, your job, your family, your church, your country. We come to it as individuals with our past, our identity. But when we're in the society we're in, we abide by their rules and work to be a positive influence on it. You maintain your moral code and your identity, but you be a force for good and unity in whatever you choose, and wherever, I guess you say, wherever you choose to live. So what does all that have to do with a 14-year-old and the decisions that were made at the time? Looking back, I believe when I was 14, I did this to some extent. All right, I didn't sabotage their fandom. I participated while maintaining my identity. And on Monday, when I could see the pain, I didn't gloat. I got back on the wheel, and we got back to work. And it was a gloomy winter week, but we were back to being all in it together. Yeah, I maintained my identity as one would, but you're also in that society and you work as a force for good. And so, yeah, when the root for the home team is a nod to the fact that had the Eagles won, it would have been a better week. And I would go to that short of any true rooting interest, somebody on the team, root for the home team. It doesn't hurt to be pulling on the same side. if your society is pushing you away from your religion or your moral beliefs, then no, you have the right to remain your identity. Sports team? Yeah, I learned then. It's nice to have a rooting interest outside, and especially if your team's not in it. You can still have a rooting interest. I certainly have other teams that I do that for. But when it comes to them being in it, came face to face with this because growing up in a lot of time in South Jersey, I had listened to Yankee games when I was a kid. And so I was a Yankee fan for that. And they never played the Phillies directly in the World Series, though just missing in the late 70s and early 80s. And maybe I'd have been the same way about it back then. But in 2009, they did meet up in the World Series, and the Yankees won that one as the Phillies were defending champs at the time. But I was rooting for the home team. I know with that championship, that parade and everything is, and it just feels good. Alright, moved along a few of those there. Have been to a couple of parades, and it's great. It's a fun time, it's memorable, and what else do you need than something like that, right? Have some memorable times. Don't know if I would ever go down to a parade again, but enjoyed my times when I've done that. And let's see, we have a couple here. Daily, the U out. So, pump. I wouldn't have thought whelp was a word, but here we are. And there we go. So cleared that one out in real time. I believe ratio was the word we had on the first one today. We start with ratio. We get a couple more letters in there. Now, this is a bit of a jump here, but let's see. Nope, we do not have double E's, so we know the S is second place. So I haven't used the G yet. I haven't used the U yet. Let's see how that works. And there you go. Easy as pie. Usage. And we'll treat ourselves to one here. Already screwing up. Get those 10s out. Unable to yet. There we go. That should scoot us through. Oh! 29 seconds. Not good enough for first. Alright, so let's use these words to come up with an image for today. So let's say a plump groom in a motel tryst sees a feral shark in the alley wooing a ghoul. I think that's a little too much. Let's just go with that. Alright, be back in 3, 2, 1. Okay, and we're back. There's what we got. So we got the shark. I guess we might have a groom's foot there. But there's a plump groom in a Motel Tris sees a feral shark in the alley. I don't think we're quite getting it with all of that, but got the motel, got the shark. He's plump. So there is your optimal image based on our word game words for today. Alright, so we go from our shark to, let's move along with saint of the day is Saint Giles Mary of Saint Joseph, born Francesco. So about the time of Napoleon. There's a man who worked in various roles at a hospice, cook, porter, official beggar for the community. And it was basically one who gave his life to charity of the poor and those in need. Reflection for him, people often become arrogant and power hungry when they forget their own sinfulness and ignore the gifts God has given to other people. So he had a healthy sense of his own sinfulness, but he invited men and women to recognize their own gifts and to live out their dignity as people made in God's divine image. This is our reflection to go forward and think about that in other people. It's simply the act of recognizing that everyone is made in God's image, has their own gifts, and we should recognize that. And look at that in other people today as you go about. Still thinking about, from Friday, it was Saint Scholastica and the impact she had on her brother Benedict. These two people, their twin brother, they wanted to be together. Or she wanted to be with her brother. But they lived lives in the monasteries that were isolating. And shortly before her death, she called her brother to be with her, because she knew she didn't have long, but he had his tradition of every night he went back to the monastery. And so she asked God to keep him there. And storm comes along, and he has to stay. He couldn't leave. And it is something from a sibling standpoint to think about that, if you're praying for your own siblings and or maybe those of your kids or parents or in the family, those would be Benedict and Scholastica, the ones you should maybe pray for intercessions to bring them together, because they set that example. They couldn't be together. They lived their lives apart, but still had that bond. Again, a couple lessons on this. Root for the home team. It's a social thing to do, and it applies beyond just sports. You're all part of the society, and even if you are not rooting for the home team, you are honoring and respecting that society that you're in. I look back on this in my Monday morning after that Super Bowl. I was reflecting, empathetic towards the mood of the town. There was no celebration. It was time to get back to work, and went on with that. I'm Brian DeMarco. Hope this helps to optimize your day. This is Optimal Brian. Again, the music you've heard is available at briandemarco.bandcamp.com. We will be back. I will be back with another one as we go through the week and just try to make things a little bit brighter. Thank you all.